has been a difficult year, I think, for security token industry. There is a lot of interest and a lot of benefits to tokenization and issuing digital securities. I'm a huge fan. Yet we haven't seen a lot of projects actually closing their rounds and reaching those hard caps or soft caps. There's definitely a lot of interest. I feel like market is picking up. We have a few projects in the pipeline that are ready to launch in the next month or so that's good news. Definitely we need some more activity, I think, on the marketing, on the broker-dealer side. And FINRA started moving on those broker-dealer applications, so we think that's going to boost the market quite a bit. Another trend that I'm seeing that's very interesting, especially in terms of providing future liquidity for this market and for digital securities, is that companies and funds actually tokenizing their existing cap tables and existing LP interests. And I find it very interesting, definitely very exciting to tokenize existing private securities and then put them on secondary market for trading. Surprisingly, what we've seen in the past 3 months is that the network and platform tokens are having some sort of a comeback. And while we've been focusing on digital securities and we've been doing it for the past 2 years, that's how we initially got into this space in 2017 at the height of ICOs. We looked at these instruments, we said, well, they're probably going to be treated as securities in US law, so what we'll do is we'll work with issuers on structuring it in a compliant way. And I'm a lawyer. I love digital securities. I understand these products. If we're tokenizing equity, if we're tokenizing income streams, if we're tokenizing LP interest, there's a really clear and straightforward framework for doing that in the US. And then it's projects like platform tokens and network tokens, where you're now looking at hybrid instruments. On one hand, these projects are raising funds via security token and they're selling these instruments as securities. On the other hand, these are hybrid instruments. They're not traditional securities. They're meant to be used on the platform. They're meant to be used to tokenize development teams, to further develop the network. What do you do with these hybrid instruments? And those are very complex projects, to be honest. I love them. That's when my kind of like nerd side kicks in. You really need to understand the technology, how the platform and the project is functioning. We haven't seen many of those projects piquing interest from the investor side in 2018, and I see that trend is changing now. We've seen quite a few of the network projects that were focusing on building the product and the network and really decentralized products in the past year and a half, 2 years. They're now picking up interest from the users and investors side. So this is going to be very interesting. There are a lot of projects, very interesting projects that are raising funds and are hoping from Asia that are hoping to raise funds in the US. And there are a lot of projects here in the US that are hoping to raise funds in Asia. And I think once we'll figure out how to bridge these two markets and have a very good infrastructure in place, where we're on the same page in terms of regulations, in terms of how regulators and governments treat these instruments and securities, in terms of broker-dealer teams being able to work with these digital securities both here and in Asia, ATS and secondary trading platforms being available on both sides of the world. That's what really will push the market forward. Well, there are a few things to keep in mind here, right? So one is obviously the promise of liquidity, right? And the fact that they can now give this option to the investors. Another thing is the companies that are looking at tokenization of existing cap tables and products are larger companies or institutions that don't necessarily need to raise money, but they do need to provide additional benefits to their existing clients. And that's when tokenization comes in. And the more projects like that we'll see, I think the more it will help develop and push the industry forward. There are so many, I wouldn't know where to start, so I have a few favorites. Yeah. Obviously, the LP interest in private funds, like venture funds, right? Highly illiquid instrument, very hard and expensive to transfer, very long exit. You're looking at 7-10 years, right, to exit the position. So that's very interesting for tokenization, and that's actually the project that we've seen being tokenized, and those were one of the first projects that went on secondary market in the US, right, on platforms like Open Finance, and Securitize has done a lot of those issuances, and they're really the pioneers, right, in the space. I'm also personally very excited about the private security space. If you look at private issuances in the US, I think in 2017 the Reg D placements were $1.8 trillion. That's a huge market. If you could, and those are securities issued in a traditional way, right? If you can potentially tokenize that space, those are highly illiquid and obscure instruments. If you can add, ease of transfer. Let's not even talk about liquidity at this point, right? Because we're a few years away. But ease of transfer, ease of cap table management, ease of dividend distributions, and transparency of ownership, that's just an amazing product.